Here we're going to look at the animal phylum Porifera, or sponges. Now the reason why I have this kind of down here, and you'll see that in some of the videos I put below the name, is kind of how to pronounce it. Porifera. So just kind of spelled out the way I can kind of best put it down there. Not correct kind of English as far as pronunciation goes, but it just gives you an idea of how to properly pronounce the phylum here. And we're talking about sponges here, Porifera. This is how they look. And this might be kind of the most famous sponge you might be familiar with here, but we're going to be talking today about the real sponges that live under the water and not necessarily in pineapples. So sponges, animals without tissues, that's the key indication here for what defines a sponge. Now sponges are animals, they're not plants. They're the simplest of animals. Their bodies are a little more than masses of specialized cells embedded in a gel-like matrix, and the clumps of cells disassociated from a sponge can give rise to new sponges. So how do we get a new sponge from an original sponge? Well, these clumps of cells kind of break apart and they reattach to an area and they can regenerate another sponge there. So again, we're in the phylum here where we're looking at the diverse amount of sponges that do occur. So while some are different colors and some are brightly colored, some others are more of a dull color. And that's just associated with that particular sponge variety. What is a sponge? Well, they don't have tissues, so the body of the sponge is perforated with many little pores here. This is kind of a zoomed in version of that. The sponge is a filter feeder which traps any food particles that pass by. This is again a zoomed in version here. So we see our microvilli being able to kind of filter out water that's being exchanged through the sponge. This is typically why there's this long kind of tube-like shape here. Give you another example of just kind of how they look. They're asymmetrical. Heterotrophic, and has no cell walls. So again, the no cell walls, again, indicates because we are talking about animals, and they do need to consume food, they're not making their own. And we see indicated here are water in and water out, so they are exchanging water from the outside environment. Here's a little short video here about filtering barrel and chimney sponges, and this is again just another look here where we're seeing water's coming in and going out the top. As it's coming in, all these little hair-like features are kind of out there. They're kind of being used to try to absorb or pick up food particles that pass by. The specialized cell type, see this is a little bit more of a detailed version of zooming in here, where our water is being pulled in through the sides, and it's being exited out the top. And as it's being pulled in, again, these microvilli, all these little hairs, this high surface area, is increasing the odds that they come in contact with a food particle that might be in the water here that's brought in. I'm not going to go over all the names and the details. I want you to know the basics here. We have our specialized cell types. Even though no tissues are present, they're still taking in water that contains food particles. They're filtering that food out, and ideally the filtered water here is exiting out the top. Hopefully this gives you just a little bit of an insight of how the simplest of all the animals lives here, the basic sponge.